I know we're going to work on the air, try to get it going. I think a lot of it is just the ceiling fans aren't on. That's a little bit to do with it. No, really I don't. I don't think I've ever messed with the fans or the air or anything, to be honest with you. I don't think I've ever turned any of it on. If it's me, I'll turn something on, but it won't be the fans. Okay. So it probably wouldn't be good. Somebody will have to show me on it. Glad to have everybody who's joining us online or as we're streaming tonight. We're glad to have that. You joining us, those who are joining us tonight on that, appreciate that. Appreciate you being here tonight. I know summertime, we talk about it every week, but summertime, it's just a different time of the year. It's just different. Obviously, for a school teacher, it's extremely different. But just in general, for everybody, no matter what your job is, it's just a different time of the year. Now, next week, we have VBS, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So I don't know this officially, but we probably won't have class Wednesday. Probably something VBS going on Wednesday night. So there probably won't be a class. Gail, there probably won't be a class next Wednesday. I mean, we'll have VBS going on. Yeah, there won't be a class. So you get a week off from me. I know that's going to be music to your ears. So you don't got to worry about listening to me for a week. We're probably, okay, so the summer quarter goes June, July, and August, okay? And this is the second Wednesday in July. So we're probably about halfway through the quarter. I'm going to, if I can remember before you leave tonight, I have another handout, but it's a handout on all the different interactions with different people that Jesus had. Most of them we're going to talk about. Some we may not talk about. But it has two columns. One is the person or persons, and then what the conclusion was from the interaction. And I thought this might be a good time halfway through just to maybe review some of the interactions that we've already had, maybe let you see what some of the interactions, give you a preview of what some of the interactions are going forward with it. And if I can remember, I will get one of these. If you don't, remind me before you leave tonight, and I'll hand you one. And I'll bring it next week in case you don't. But so you can see what some of these interactions are. Before we get going, any thoughts in between last week and this week about any interaction that Jesus has had with so far with any of the people that we have talked about? Anything that maybe you didn't think about or you didn't realize that you might want to share with us, or maybe something you've learned? Has there been something that you have taken away from Jesus' interactions that maybe you hadn't thought of in a way before, or anything? Does anybody have any thoughts that they want to share before we start again this week on any of the interactions that we have discussed so far? If right. And obviously, we can't know what all the thoughts were, even Jesus' side that he had, or the person that he was interacting with, or the situation, the people involved in each interaction. But maybe we can get a better understanding of the way Jesus is thinking and how he approaches certain situations. You know, we're always striving to be Christ-like, you know. I know I was talking Sunday when we had Bible class, David was asking me about some of these interactions, and one thing I said in class was that looking at these interactions was how these people's way of thinking was different than the way Jesus was thinking. And these people are people like Pilate who are supposed to be in the know in how they think. You know, they're in important positions. How people who you look on a daily life, oh, well, if they think this way, that's the way it's got to be. These people were like that, but Jesus comes along and says, that's not the way that I'm thinking. We'll throw out one that David covered last week, Nicodemus. You know, Nicodemus, how can a man re-enter his mother's womb? Well, that's not the way that's not what Jesus is talking about or thinking. And Nicodemus is a very well-respected man, very intelligent man. And I'm sure the way he had been looked at, well, if Nicodemus is thinking this way, or he's made decisions, or whatever, people were like, well, if he's thinking it, it must be this way. But yet, on this one subject, he's totally off page with Jesus. Yes? Right. 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 Yes, ma'am. Right. And one thing I thought about, this was after class last week, when we were talking about Jesus and Pilate and how actually I thought about it again after David's class Sunday. That's why God sent him down here, to get us straight, to tell us how it is. Have you ever had to straighten someone out on something before? How did you straighten them out? Have you ever had to straighten your kids out before? Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Straightening someone out. Yes. Yeah. One thing about kids today, teaching them, almost, I don't want to put a percentage on it, but it's a very high percentage. Most kids are visual learners. I can talk and talk, but if I put a picture up or a diagram, a lot of kids relate to that. Yeah. I guarantee adults my age are probably, most of us are visual learners. Yeah. Yeah. You know, I think that one thing that I think good preachers do is they give you a visual image of something that's happening that they're just talking about in the Bible in their lesson. They give you a good visual image. Now, one thing that helps them, obviously, is we have pictures we can put up there, which helps out a lot. I know me, for me, part of my thing is I have to write it down and look at it. Or if I have an idea, like let's say a basketball play of some kind, I have to write it down and look at it. That's kind of how, I mean, there's no doubt I'm a visual learner. No doubt about it. But going on what you said, Jesus did. He showed us. He didn't just speak it. He lived it. He showed us. Which, when you think about where he came from, it's almost unbelievable that someone can be that humble. You know, to have the power and to be from a place like heaven, which is the ultimate, to come to earth, to live the way that he lived, you know. Did Jesus have a set home that he went to every night? Yeah. I had a friend, I've never been to Phoenix, Arizona, but I had a friend that went to the Final Four there. They've had it there a couple of times. He said you wouldn't believe the amount of homeless people in Phoenix, Arizona. And I was thinking, like, why is there so many homeless there? Well, it's warm at night. You know, it doesn't get, I mean, it's warm throughout. You know, it's, you know, I'm sure it gets cold there sometimes, but I'm just saying, you know, but there's, you have that, but he says it's unbelievable the amount of homeless people that are there. You know, we talked about John the Baptist that first week, that a lot of people, if he was here today, we would look at him as a radical. Well, when you hear that word radical, does good thoughts enter your mind? With certain, you know, or what people perceive as a radical person? You know? It's like trying to see. I think this is one thing that we definitely try to do in Bible class. And I think one thing with Bible class is we obviously try to get things, talk about things that we can relate to in everyday life. Okay? And I think that's one thing a preacher really tries to do, is he tries to, when he preaches, he tries to get things that you can relate to in everyday life, that you can take with you and add to your everyday life. But what's difficult, especially when we're doing what we're doing right now, is we're trying to almost put ourselves in these people's places. Why are they thinking the way they're thinking? You know, and if you, and you know, we know it's impossible to think the way Jesus thinks and God, but we try, don't we? We want to do that. We want to think the way Jesus did. We want to be Christ-like. We strive for that. Will we, and this is a question, answer you already know, but I think it's relevant to ask. Can we earn our way into heaven? We can't, can we? Oh, but I never missed a day of church for 40 years. I prayed every day my whole life. I read my Bible 5-6 times a week, sometimes 7. I know there was some days I went through where I didn't sin. But it's not, is it? It's His grace. It's His grace and His mercy that we don't just kind of need, we just kind of cling to as hard as we can. It's like we're holding on to it. Have you ever held on to something like unbelievable? Thankfully, I've never been on a ledge and had to hold on for my life. Okay? Hopefully, I never do. I will tell you this one time. My dad used to have cows, and I was probably, 8, 9 years old. And don't ask me why. But I got in a pen with a Brahma bull. Well, that Brahma bull, he was on that side of the fence and I was over here. For some reason, he didn't like that. And he charged toward me. And I climbed up on this fence and climbed over and just kind of held on to the, till he went away. But it was like, no way I'm letting go of this. No way. No. So, but those are, and so like this week we're going to cover 2 situations, and I don't know, we may get through this in 15, 20 minutes, I don't know. But first we're going to look at Thomas, and there's not a whole lot there, like we was with Pilate last week. But I think a couple of things about Thomas before we get to the main interaction with him. Let's start off in John chapter 11, verse 16. A couple of things I think is always interesting about Thomas when you talk about him. Because we know what the narrative is of him, but I think there's some things that you can, before we get to the narrative of him. It says, then Thomas, also known as Didymus, by the way, he was referred to as he had a twin, said to the rest of the disciples, let us go that we may die with him. Now, I'm going to jump up a little bit earlier. It says, so Jesus told him, Lazarus is dead, and for your sake I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe, but let us go to him. Then Thomas comes in and says to the rest of the disciples, let us go that we may die with him. Now, pretend like you don't know anything else about Thomas but just that right there. What would you think about Thomas? Pretend like nothing, not the other things to come, but if you only read that about Thomas, what would you think about him? Oh, dedicated and loyal. That's a far cry from what the narrative is of him, isn't it? I mean, first of all, there's apostles, and he's the one who says something. He's the one. I mean, there's not a lot of things that in the Bible about Thomas speaking. But here's one that John said, hey, Thomas said that. Not Peter, not me. Thomas said this. Dedicated and loyal. Good. Remember that. Remember he said that. Okay? Let's go to John chapter 13. Okay, 36 through 38. John chapter 13, verses 36 through 38. Simon Peter asked him, Lord, where are you going? Jesus replied, where I am going you cannot follow now, but you will follow later. Peter asked, Lord, why can't I follow you now? I will lay down my life for you. Then Jesus answered, will you really lay down your life for me? Very truly I tell you, before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times. Now, I know this is about Peter, okay? And I know we're talking about Thomas. I get it. But what does that sound like with Peter? I mean, what is coming out of Peter's mouth? Dedicated and loyal, isn't it? Okay? But yet, we don't really remember Peter. I mean, we know that he obviously denied him, but we don't, that's not like a mark on him like it is on Thomas, is it? You know? Let's go to John chapter 14. All right, verses 1 through 7. John chapter 14, verses 1 through 7. This is Jesus talking. Do not let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God. Believe also in me. My Father's house has many rooms. If there were not so, would I have told you that I am going there to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, that you also may be where I am. You know the way to the place where I'm going. In verse 5, Thomas said to him, Lord, we don't know where you are going, so how can we know the way? Any thoughts on that? What Thomas said right there. Okay? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Jesus answered, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If you really know me, you will know my Father as well. From now on, you do know him and have seen me. Okay? Let's go to the crux of it. Okay? But what I think you should think about is Jesus is telling them the way it is. Okay? He's saying, if you look at this at the end, it says, if you really know me, you will know my Father as well. Now, I know this isn't a one-on-one interaction with Thomas, but it is an interaction with Thomas nonetheless. Okay? There's disciples with him, but he is speaking to each one of them individually. You know, sometimes when I'm talking to my team, I tell them, if I'm talking to one person, I'm talking to all of you. Now, I'm just going to ask you, what does that mean if I say that? If I'm talking to one person, I'm talking to all of you. What am I trying to prevent you from doing? Yeah. Say it again, Sam. Yeah. Yeah. And even though he is talking to them as a group, he means it one individually with them. In there. Okay, let's go to chapter 20. And then go to we'll start verse 24. Okay, so now Jesus is going to appear to Thomas. Okay, this is when Jesus appears to Thomas. Now, I want you to think about some of the things we just read and what Jesus has said to these apostles as a group. Some of the things that he has said. It says, now Thomas, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. Which is very interesting because are the disciples out and about and all over the place right now, wanting to be seen and heard? You would think they were all together, you know. They're, not wanting to be found, scared, however you want to look at it, but yet he's not there. I think that's real interesting. I mean, why would he be by himself? So the other disciples told him, "We have seen the Lord." How would you feel if someone told you they had seen something? We won't even say Jesus, but let's just say something that you thought wasn't going to happen. You ever had someone say something to you, "Hey, I saw this," and you're like, "What? No, you didn't see that. You didn't see that." It says, but he said to them, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails were and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." He's exactly right. Thomas is dedicated and loyal. But where's the dedication and loyalty right now? And how does that relate to us today? How does that relate to us today?
It's not that he didn't believe Jesus, but he didn't believe them.
Okay? It makes you wonder, do they play a prank on him in the past of some kind? Have you ever had a prank played on you? Yeah. Well, and it's easy for them to believe because they saw him, didn't they? Well, that's easy for you. You saw him. I hadn't seen him yet. Yeah. It says, I'm going to repeat this one part again. It says, unless I see the nail marks in his hand. I know we have said things, well, unless I see him, okay, because there used to be this thing, and I'm throwing out a lot of basketball stuff tonight, okay? There used to be this story that there was a guy named David Thompson could touch the top of the backboard. Like if you put $1 up there, he could jump high enough to get it off. I'm not talking like the white square above the goal. We're talking the top of the backboard. Okay, a goal is 10 feet. What do you think? About another 3 or 4 feet up to the top? David Thompson. I never saw it on TV, but I have heard so many people on TV say that they saw him get $1 off the top of the backboard. That is unbelievable to me. I can't imagine that, somebody jumping that high. I mean, I've seen people get the top of the white square. Now, there was another joke saying he could grab $1 and leave change. Now, I'm not believing that one either. That one I'm definitely not going for, okay? Yeah, they used to say, yeah, he could get up there, grab $1 and leave change. I'm definitely not buying that one. Well, yeah, but I sure can't imagine someone, and David Thompson, I think, was 6'6", okay, and he was a really good athlete. I mean, don't get me wrong. He was a super athlete. He's in the Basketball Hall of Fame. But to see him jump, like, it's amazing to me to see someone touch the top of the white square. That amazes me. See someone slap that. But to jump, like, I just can't believe that. I mean, I really can't. It's hard for me to believe that. I would have to see that. I would literally have to see it. I probably would go for it on television, but then part of my mind might be like, well, that could be some trick photography, this goal. Like, I almost literally would have to see that in person, face to face, to believe it. Yes.
When you keep one hand,
Yeah.
it's one thing to see, but physically,
Yes.
you don't believe
Exactly. He says, unless I see the nail marks in his hands, and which we're going to get to here in a second. He don't want to just see him. He wants to see where those nail marks are, because he saw that happen. Yeah. Hey, no, I gotta, because I know what I saw, and there ain't no way anybody can survive from that. I'm paraphrasing here and I might be putting words in Thomas's mouth, but I'm just saying, he's like, I saw what happened. There ain't nobody surviving that. You know? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly, yes.
you said relating to today, but, he was, not seeing it, so, he had to have the belief, and I think that's the same thing,
Yeah.
we don't see him, so we just have to have.
Yes. That's where our reward is. And I'm going to add to that in just a second. A week later, because you just hit the nail on the head. A week later, okay, so it says, put my hand into his side, I will not believe. Okay, so John says a week later, not later that day, a week has gone by. Think about that for a second. A lot of thoughts could go through your mind in a week, huh? His disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them this time. And though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, peace be with you. By the way, just think about that for a second. The doors were locked and Jesus came through. That's supernatural, okay? In case you guys are wondering what an example of supernatural is, that's supernatural, okay? If we locked those doors and I was standing outside, I could not come through those doors. No matter how hard I tried, unless I busted them down or something. Jesus came and stood among them and said, peace be with you. Then he said to Thomas. Now, how would Jesus know that Thomas said that to the disciples? He just knows, doesn't he? He just knows. Which we've seen a lot in these interactions, haven't we? Those magic responses, those magic thoughts that he shares. And it's almost like Jesus is saying, okay, put your finger here and see my hands. Here. It's not a joke, but it's like he's like, hey, okay, here. Put your finger here. See. Yes.
Kind of reminds me of this old song we used to sing. Watching you, there's an all-seeing God watching you.
Yeah. Put your finger here and see my hands. Okay? Still don't believe? Reach your hand and put it into my side. Okay? I don't want you to just see it. I want you to feel it. Okay? Just so you'll stop doubting and you'll start believing. And of course, Thomas, you can only imagine what he's thinking right now. Thomas said to him, "My Lord and my God." Now, mine has an exclamation mark behind God. Now, what do we know about statements that have exclamation marks behind them? It's said with a lot of emotion, isn't it? And it's usually said loud. And I've already probably busted Cheryl's eardrums a couple of times this summer, so I'm not going to say it loud. But he was emotional when he said that. Oh, he might have turned as white as a ghost. Yeah. Right. Well, and that's and I'm glad you said that, because that goes back to why we read that about Peter a little bit. You know, but the one thing I was going to say about with Peter is what do we say about Thomas? We say, we even sometimes you have heard people say, "Well, he's just a doubting Thomas." Have you ever heard that? Have you ever heard somebody call somebody that, a doubting Thomas? That's what I'm saying is, he kind of gets a bad rap. Is that a fair statement to make? If you disagree, I understand. Right. But my only thing is, he was the only disciple there that didn't seem. The rest of them did. It was easy for them to say that. It's a good point. It's a good point. Why would this happen? And maybe you just answered it. Why would this be in the Bible? What are we to take from this? Because we're never going to experience it, or probably not going to experience a situation like Thomas with Jesus. But why would this be in the Bible? Yep, and this is where you hit the nail on the head. This last, Jesus told them, "Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." Who's the blessed? I'm looking at you. I'm looking at you. You walk out here tonight and tell somebody, "I'm one of the blessed."
Would you say that's mankind?
Yeah, good. Yeah, you can walk out of here and say, "Hey, I'm one of the blessed." See what somebody says to you on that. The first person you meet in a store, go over there and say, "Hey, how you doing? I'm one of the blessed." You know, I could see myself, though, being like Thomas. I could. I could see, I would hope that I wouldn't be, but I could see how I might be like Thomas. I hope that doesn't make you think less of me, but I'm just saying that I could see I mean, that's a hard thing to believe when somebody comes back from the dead. Yes.
That comes with if someone professes to be a Christian and yet they lose someone
Yeah.
and they lose themselves. No, that's not how it should be. If anything, it should give you more hope because you know that person, you know Jesus.
Right.
I guess my question is Thomas saying he didn't believe Christ had been resurrected? Or was he saying, I'm not believing you guys?
Well, if he was filling his hands,
But he never did. He said he wanted to.
right.
He refused the opportunity he was given.
Well, I think there's some truth to that too. You know, one thing I've said, and you guys have been in class with me before, you know, I've said about Judas, and I mean, look, I'm not trying to excuse anything. It just wasn't what Judas thought it was going to be. Judas thought Jesus was going to be a Goliath, okay? And was going to just say, phew. And when it didn't go the way he thought, he panicked. Okay? Now that's my feeling about Judas. And I'm not excusing him for anything, okay? But it didn't go the way he thought it would. It's possible it didn't go the way Thomas thought it was going to be. It's just a thought. Yeah.
All through the Gospels, the disciples would question, what man is this? Referring to Jesus. They were just like we are. Just
And they're getting a first-hand look at everything.
and Thomas
And they're with him all the time.
was right there too.
Well, it's just like Peter. I mean, Peter would give his life for Jesus, but yet he denied him 3 times. In a moment that you don't, that's like a moment you don't get to take back. Yes, ma'am. Right.
Sometimes I think you're sitting there going, I believe in this, but what if?
Yeah.
What if it's not? What they just had a what if?
Yeah.
When we read this, even as old as I am, when you consider the thoughts that go through your head,
Mm-hmm.
maybe good, maybe bad, but then you consider who knows all those thoughts, it gives you a chill.
It does. It's very surreal when you get to really thinking about some of this.
My aunt always tell me, don't go to the in the Bible.
Mhm.
What they got totally different from.
Right.
She said, don't go to the ones that you don't believe in. Go to the ones that you do.
Yeah. It's, what else about Thomas? Well, that's what I'm saying. I don't think anybody thinks he's bad, but when you go around and you hear that phrase, doubting Thomas, it's like this guy, but like you said, he was a dedicated, loyal person. Yeah, I don't blame him at all. I think he gets a bad rap. He does. Yeah. It's almost like being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Like you do everything perfect, and just one instant you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, and that's the only time anybody remembers you doing anything. The other 9 out of 10 times you're doing everything right. Yes. Yeah. I mean, he was as dedicated and as loyal as any of the disciples. He was as dedicated and loyal as any. But yeah. Yes. And yeah, and it's 2024. And it's stood the test of time. It's 2024 and you still can hear you're a doubting Thomas. Like there's something wrong with you. I mean, that's not a positive thing when you say that to somebody.
Well, virtually you're saying that to understands the background of the doubting Thomas part, that might get them to reflect back on Jesus.
It could. It could.
Bring that to the forefront one more time in their life, and maybe they'll say, "Oh, I need to change what I'm doing here."
Mm-hmm. What do you think, Sam?
Well, you alluded to it earlier, that time and again, disciples expected the Messiah to do like Messiah. They were expecting somebody to come straighten this mess out. And said that they got an ending that they did not expect.
Right.
Well, and they would also remember the next verse, when he says, "Oh, my Lord, my God."
Right. All right, go to Matthew chapter 27. I don't know how much we'll get into this, but there's a little bit of time left. Matthew 27, verses 38 through 44. Matthew 27, 38 through 44. Find it here somewhere here. Okay, now I'm reading out the NIV, so yours might be. 2 rebels were crucified with him, one on his right and one on his left. Those who passed by hurled insults at him, shaking their heads and saying, You who are going to destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself. Come down from the cross if you are the Son of God." In the same way, the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and the elders mocked him. "He saved others," they said, "but he can't save himself. He's the King of Israel. Let him come down now from the cross, and we will believe in him." He trusts in God. Let God rescue him now if he wants him. For he said, "I am the Son of God." In the same way, the rebels who were crucified with him also heaped insults at him. Okay, so we're talking about the dying thief now. We're kind of changing gears a little bit. The dying thief starts off hurling insults at Jesus, which I'm going to be honest with you. When I first started reading this, I don't know if I had forgotten it or not aware of it. All I thought is what he said at the end. But he starts off not being that way. Now, maybe you guys already knew that, probably did already know that, but for some reason, was not aware of that or had thought of that. Let's go to Luke chapter 23. Luke chapter 23. And this is on your handout on the back. But go to Luke chapter 23. Yeah, go to verses 39. I tell you what, let's read verse 34 real quick. Luke chapter 23. Go to verse 34 for just a minute. And then we'll go to... Okay, it says, Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." Okay? And so Jesus has said this. He has said this on the cross. Father, forgive them. They do not know what they are doing. Then go to verse 39. Go down to verse 39. It says, one of the criminals, there's a big difference between being called a rebel and being called a criminal. Matthew called them rebels. Luke is calling them criminals. It's just a little... it says, one of the criminals who hung there hurled insults at him. Aren't you the Messiah? Save yourself and us. But the other criminal rebuked him. Don't you fear God, he said, since you are under the same sentence. We are punished justly, for we are getting what our deeds deserve, but this man has done nothing wrong. Then he said, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And Jesus answered him, truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise. So he starts off like everybody else, but he changes. What do you think changes him? He's on the cross. He didn't go anywhere. Because initially he's just hurling insults, right? But now he's like, leave him alone. He doesn't deserve. We deserve what we're getting. He doesn't. Remember me where you're going. It said they both were hurling insults at him in Matthew. Matthew said they both were at the beginning. But Matthew was also calling them rebels. Luke's calling them criminals, too. Yes. Mm-hmm. How he's handling this situation. Because, like you said, being who he was, everybody knew who Jesus was. And he's handling it, forgiving them. Lord, they do not know what... Like, that might have been it. When he said that, that might have turned a switch on. You ever had a switch turn on? Your switch up here ever turned on before? Oh, you know what? I get it. He got it. Now, it was late. It was like at the very end, but he got it. He got it. And I'm wondering when Jesus said that, if that didn't turn things around for him. And like you said, maybe just observing it, knowing, hey, I'm about to go and I'm seeing how this guy's handling. I think you're both on the right track, what you're thinking. What's that interaction between Jesus and this thief? What's the lesson there? And we're talking dying seconds, right? I mean, this is like it's almost about done. And we're talking about someone who just committed a... He was a criminal. I mean, a criminal's a criminal. Luke calls him a criminal. And he says that, doesn't he? He says, we deserve what we get. He doesn't. But that interaction, too, I think, thing to think about with it, you don't know when these interactions are going to happen. You know, you probably, one of the last places you think an interaction would happen is two guys hanging on a cross. But that's when it happened. And when we interact with Jesus, we don't know when it's going to happen. We don't know when that magic moment, and I'm not making fun of it, is going to happen. Yes.
I think there's another message too, is that we never know when an opportunity will present itself for us to testify to Christ.
That's right. You know, I don't know for sure what's changed his thoughts. I mean, my thought is Jesus saying, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. But I don't know that that's what it was. But whatever it was, he got it. He got it. And it didn't matter how much time he had left on earth. He got it. And he was with Jesus. Yes. Facing death. And it does. Yeah. It does. It does. You know? In there. But, you know, it's not a long interaction. But it's, you know, it's one of those things, it's not the quantity, but the quality. And that was a quality interaction right there. Saved his life. Right. Mm-hmm. Right. Yes, ma'am.
And I've seen things on television, men that are going to be executed, and there's usually a man of faith that visits with them. I just thought, gosh, an opportunity to make them fine.
And again, this is where we're blessed that we believe in Jesus. We want to live our lives with Jesus, even though we haven't had the interaction that maybe are exactly like these people or like Thomas and see it. For us to believe the way that we believe, especially I know these people that are in this building right now, the way that we believe, that is encouraging. That is very encouraging.
That's one of the reasons that it says, do not forsake the assembly, because it builds up our faith.
Yeah. I mean, there's over 20 of us in here, right? Just in this part, right? We have some up there too, which they count also. On a Wednesday night in the middle of the week. Because we believe the Bible. We chose to believe in Jesus. Even though we haven't seen those nails, we haven't. Our interaction with Him can be with each other, can be whatever, but an interaction with Jesus is an interaction with Jesus. In there. Any other questions, comments? I appreciate it all. I appreciate everything you guys being here and you saying and questioning. It makes the class so much easier to teach. Thank you guys all for that. Thank you for joining us online, and see you next week.